is the Business of Reselling podcast. I'm your host, Jessica Oman. Hey, everyone. It's episode 20 of the Business of Reselling podcast, the final episode of 2022. We're going to cap it off with a quick Just the Tip episode. And it's going to be all about goal setting and looking forward into 2023, right? How perfect is that? I've got the business background. I'm a business plan writer. I'm an educator. And I always have talked to my students about how to put systems and processes in place to help them achieve their academic goals. When I was a professor, I always did that. When I wrote business plans for people, I always talked to them not just about setting goals, but about having those systems and those steps in place and a plan in place to actually incrementally get there through a series of small objectives that lead you toward your goals. So I thought this is the perfect time of year as we take pause. A lot of us are taking some time off work, maybe spending some time with our families, or just taking a much needed break. We're going to start looking into 2023 and wondering, what should we do different? What do we want to achieve this year? What do we want to do that's new? Where do you want to take your reselling business in 2023? Now, if you've been listening to this podcast from the very beginning, then you know that one of my big, hairy, audacious goals is to figure out how to sell $1 million worth of product in a year. I want to set that goal for 2023, but I don't think it's a realistic one given the state of the economy right now, the pace that inflation is still going at, and how much uncertainty we have. I would have to come into a pretty incredible windfall of inventory to even have a chance at achieving that. So I'm going to be looking at something more achievable and actually less revenue based, because I think our business has good systems in place to keep us going with a steady income, with relatively steady sales. And we have really kind of nailed the operational aspects of the business. So I'm kind of taking my focus aside a little bit to look at some different types of business related goals that I think will probably help our brand and help our sales overall, but aren't necessarily directly sales related. So I'm going to share those at the end. But first, I want to talk a little bit about goal setting and a way to look at it, and a perspective that I actually sort of gleaned from my own experience as a teacher and instructor, but also combined with a fantastic article by James Clear, author of Atomic Habits, who wrote an article, or actually this is an excerpt from the book Atomic Habits that he's published on his website, that talks about goal setting. So the title of this excerpt from Atomic Habits is called Forget About Setting Goals, Focus on This Instead. And I saw this, I'm like, ooh, I think he's going to talk about systems. And I was so excited to find out that he did. So I'll just read you a couple of clips from the article, and I'll link the entire thing in the show notes for you to check out later. He opens this excerpt by saying, prevailing wisdom claims that the best way to achieve what we want in life is to set specific, actionable goals. And you have guaranteed heard this before, whether it's in school or at work or at a business class or wherever. You've heard specific, actionable, achievable, timely, and realistic, like SMART goals. You may be familiar with that acronym, that you should do that and you're more likely to achieve something. And that kind of makes sense logically. If we have a place that we want to get to, and if we have an end game in mind, we can see an outcome, we can see that sunset ahead of us, then maybe we're more likely to walk directly in the path towards that goal. But the thing is that if you have you've probably failed at achieving many other goals that you've set in the past. You may have achieved some, and you may have completely lost it when it came to other ones. And in many cases, the reason why you might fail at achieving a goal is because you didn't put a system in place to actually support you towards achieving it. So an example he gives is, if you're a coach, your goal might be to win a championship. Your system is the way that you recruit players, manage your assistant coaches, and conduct practice. If you're a musician, your goal might be to play a new piece. Your system is how often you practice, how you break down and tackle difficult measures, and your method for receiving feedback from your instructor. Now, how often you practice at anything is obviously going to be super key to helping you achieve any type of goal. And there's actually a book, maybe I should put this in the show notes too, and I may have mentioned it in other podcast episodes, a book called Outliers. It's by Malcolm Gladwell, who talks about how people who achieve incredible things, people who are outliers in their field. So we think of people like LeBron James or Bill Gates, um, Wayne Gretzky, people who have just like achieved what seems impossible. That that their 10,000 hours or more of practice is really the thing that, in addition to the strokes of luck that life may have given them, allowed them to achieve beyond what anybody else could. That practice is so essential. And I think what James Clear is getting at here too is that, that it's that practice, it's that system that you put in place that's going to make achieving a goal possible. As long as that goal is realistic. And as I just said, I think my ideal goal of selling $1 million worth of stuff in 2023 is probably not realistic. So setting a system in place to try and achieve it would probably also not be realistic. So he talks about the problems with goal setting. Things like achieving a goal is only a momentary change. So if you have a messy room and you clean it, then that's great. It's clean. You achieved your goal, but it's the habits that led you to have that messy room in the first place that are just going to lead you to have another messy room, and then you're going to have to set the same goal again to clean it up. So you didn't put a system in place to actually prevent that problem happening again. And so you constantly have to reset the same goal instead of moving towards a new goal or something bigger and greater. He also says goals restrict your happiness. So we have a tendency to put off happiness until we've achieved something. And then if we don't achieve it, we're disappointed in ourselves. So that's another reason why goal setting alone doesn't necessarily assist us in actually feeling good about the progress that we're making. So it's all about systems. And at the end of the article, he says goals are good for planning your progress, and systems are good for actually making progress. Now, at the Boss Reseller and Remix back in October, talking about systems and processes was a really big part of the talk that I gave. So I talked about things like photography. What's your process for photography? And write it down so that you can become incrementally more efficient at it. Do the same thing with listing. Do the same thing with sourcing, with shipping, with label creation, with organizing, all of those things. Put those little systems in place, and review them regularly, and you will step by step in little tiny bits begin to become better at all of those things. And then you can set things like listing goals, like, oh, normally I can only list 15 items a day, but with my new process in place, I can list 20 items a day. So you see how that works? Once you create a system and you're constantly improving that system, you can make the goals bigger and better. So 2023 for me, I'm going to say a couple of my goals here and talk about the systems that I'm thinking about putting in place to make them happen. So this will give me a little bit of accountability so we can come back next year and see if I did what I promised. So as I said a few minutes ago, my goals for next year are less revenue and sales based, but they're still business related, and I think they're going to help the business overall. A big one is around expanding the podcast. So I want to have more listeners. I want to get up to 1,000 subscribers on YouTube. That's a good goal to get to if you want to start to monetize. I also want to create a small product for you, whether that's going to be an ebook, a small course, or something like that. So if I say that my two goals for the podcast are get up to 1,000 subscribers on YouTube and create a product that goes along with the podcast that may be for some of my listeners. Those are two great goals, but I'm going to need systems in place to do that. So one of the things I'm going to be working on over the holidays, when of course I'm taking time off, quote unquote, is going to be figuring out the systems that I need to do to really build that subscriber base on YouTube. So that's going to be things like creating regular video content. It's going to be doing more posting on social media. It needs to be more specific than that, but those are some of the ideas that I'm throwing around, and I will be writing up a sort of a one-page plan of the systems and the things that I need to do and accomplish every single week to make sure that that subscriber base starts growing. And of course, it's something that I'm going to be reviewing at least every quarter, maybe more frequently than that, especially at the start before I've got a lot of momentum going, to see if it's working. So the system can always be changed. It can always be made better. It can always be made more efficient. You can add steps. You can take things away. So that's one of the systems I'm going to be thinking about. The other system for creating the product is going to depend on the product. So I'll probably do some surveying to you, my listeners, next year to see what kind of product you might potentially be interested in, and then maybe build it from there. And then I'll have to create a system for developing that product. And the system will depend on what it is that I decide to sell and when I decide to sell it. So I have those two podcast related goals that are really strongly connected to the business. And another one is I want to get more involved with green recycling initiatives and circular economy initiatives locally. So that's going to involve probably doing a little bit of volunteer work, making some donations to some environmental nonprofits that I'm interested in, and sort of figuring out how to become a bit of a voice in that part of our business community here in Metro Vancouver. So the system for that is probably going to involve going to networking events, participating in Zoom meetings about the circular economy. It might involve talking to a local government and local politicians. So I'm not sure yet. So I'm just kind of formulating the goals, and then I'm going to work backwards and create those systems. So those are some of the things that I'm working on for 2023. So you can probably guess what I'm going to say your call to action is for this final podcast of the year, which is what is one specific goal you have for 2023, and what system or systems will you put into place to make continuous improvement until you reach it? So I'm going to link you to Malcolm Gladwell's Outliers and this article from James Clear in the show notes. I want to hear your comments. So if you're on Spotify or Apple, again, I'd love an Apple review. That would be fantastic if you're listening on Apple Podcasts. Or head over to YouTube. I finally have my proper custom URL, which is youtube.com/@Storage Warrior Podcast. So now you can go directly there and you will find the video versions of all of these episodes. Hit that like button. People always say smash the like button. I don't know why they say smash. We don't need to be so violent. Click like and subscribe and share with your friends. I hope whatever you're doing these last couple of weeks of 2022, that it is fulfilling and fun, and that you get to relax and enjoy yourself, and think about how you're just going to crush it in 2023 with your reselling business. Don't forget to answer that call to action, your specific goal for 2023, and the system you'll put in place to make continuous improvement until you reach it. Fantastic. I will be back in the first week of January with a new episode, and I will be making an appearance on a much bigger podcast. So don't miss that. Have a great year, everyone.